Okay, so this session will be a discussion between the students of age 16 to 18 about the stigma around mental health in the society. Mental health is considered a rather taboo topic in the community, and people are looked down upon because of the same. This discussion revolves around this stigma and why it shouldn't be there, and what we can do to break it. Another part of mental health which is affected because of the aforementioned stigma is help seeking. People refuse to or are afraid to seek for help as mental health is considered taboo. Tune into this discussion to see our thoughts on this and what we think we can do to change it. So, hi, I'm Ria and I'm a co founder of Criseo.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm a co-founder of Criseo as well.
Hi, I'm Pravisha, and I'm here because I really care and I want to advocate for the issue at hand.
Hi, I'm Aryani, and I'm the co-founder of Project Let's Talk.
My name is Kashish, and I'm the other co founder of Let's Talk.
Ajani, do you want to go ahead and start the discussion with an anecdote?
Uh, yeah, sure. So, my anecdote is about my journey with mental health, which kind of began in seventh grade. And I started experiencing regular, like, anxiety attacks, panic attacks. And it was pretty hard because I wasn't able to go to school. Like, I had social anxiety. And just like getting up in the morning and making that effort to go to places, to go to like even a mall was hard for me. And it was the first time that I actually like experience something so consuming. So I struggled with that for a few months, and eventually I reached out for help. So I told my parents what was going on. I told my school, my friends, but I actually like I experienced a lot of stigma. I think it made people uncomfortable because mental health isn't something that's like generally talked about that much, and we just keep it to ourselves. So the fact that I became so vocal about it and it was so evident to people, I think that made people uncomfortable. So that year, like I remember my relationship with my parents wasn't great because it was hard for them to understand, and it was also like painful to see that your child is going through something like that. And especially like at school, like I said, it was hard for me to go to school. So I remember there was this one coordinator that I had in seventh grade, and she used to tell me like all of these horrible things about myself. She used to say that I was making it up. She never really believed me. She invalidated every experience that I talked about. She told me that um, to have permission to not come to school, I would have to explain exactly why I was going through what I was going through. I would have to justify myself all the time. And when I did, she would tell me that worse things have happened to other people, and I had no right to kind of put everyone through so much by going through what I was going through. So I think that that was like my first really hard experience with stigma around mental health, and it's something that affects like so many people. Like I've been fortunate enough to be able to reach out for help, and now I'm in like a better place because I got that help. But because of people like that and because of the stigma, there's like millions of people and students around the world who don't want to reach out for help because they'll get that kind of response. So yeah, really glad to be here and be part of this discussion.
So, I have a similar story to share. It's not necessarily about myself, but I've seen it happen a lot at school, especially where I noticed a lot of people in our grade, in fact, were suffering with lots of mental health issues and they would resort to self harm as an outlet. And when this happened, when other people saw these marks on their hands, they started to panic and stress out and yell about it and scream. And that entire scene that takes place because of just seeing a couple of marks was so like it impacted the kids going through that so much. Like they weren't able to tell anyone about it without it becoming a huge deal. And honestly, most people just really want to hear that, I'm there for you and I support you. And instead of telling them, oh my God, why are you doing this? This is so wrong. You're not supposed to be hurting yourself. Like, are you just doing this for attention? And when you say certain things like that, it really impacts the person actually who is self-harming because they're not able to like explain their feelings to the person without getting attacked. And I think it's very important to all of us to know that you shouldn't attack anyone going through something. You should just listen to them and just, try to understand what they're going through rather than yelling at them or being mad about something they've done.
So let's start off by just discussing what exactly stigma is. So stigma essentially, the textbook, I mean, the definition is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. So in this case, we're just talking about how how people suffering with their mental health are looked down upon.
So the stigma usually happens when a person is labeled by the illness they're going through. So they're no longer seen as like them individually, but as a part of a stereotyped group. So negative attitudes and beliefs towards that group that they're stereotyped to creates like prejudice, which leads to like negative actions and discrimination.
Okay, and furthermore, there are three main types of stigma. So there's stigma associated with mental illness, which is what we will be focusing on, stigma associated with physical deformation, and stigma attached to identification with a particular race, ethnicity, and religion. So basically, all of them kind of have the same idea that people treat them differently, people look down upon them. So we'll be focusing on stigma associated with mental illness today, and so it's basically also a set of people tend to alienate them, and because of yeah, I mean, alienation is also a cause and an effect to some extent because of the stigma raised around mental illnesses. They tend to treat them as something, yeah, as a different person completely, I guess. So they tend to get alienated.
I'd like to add on to that. I think many people who see or observe a person who has a mental illness, like label them so negatively, and the person that's going through the mental illness feels more down. And I think stigmatization just worsens the situation. And it makes the individual feel like they shouldn't seek out for help and just feel like, you know what, I should maybe deal with this myself. Everyone is just looking down upon me. This is like I'm a burden. And I think stigmatization is more detrimental to the society than anything ever. And just the comments that people make around us at this age, it's so sad to hear. And the consequences, I mean, it's truly disheartening.
Does anybody have anything to add on to this particular discussion?
Okay, so should we move on to the next point that we wanted to discuss was how the stigma impacts individuals. So how do you guys think it impacts people?
So yeah, I think like Tavisha said, it makes it extremely difficult to reach out for help because firstly, like if you're like I said, if you're already going through something and you actually take like that brave step to reach out, in any case, like if someone just makes a comment or puts you down, it can really impact your recovery, I feel. You start blaming yourself and you start thinking that you yourself are like making it up. You start questioning what's real and what's not. And also I think that because there's such a big stigma around like not just about mental illness, but even things like crying, like when you're young, people tell you that when you're crying, like don't cry, be strong, and it automatically becomes that like if you cry you're weak. So if we live in a society where like something as simple as like expressing such a basic emotion like sadness and crying, and that's actually supposed to make you feel better, if that's stigmatized, then bigger things like mental illness and suicidal thoughts, it makes it extremely hard for people to feel like they can reach out.
Another thing is when you hear, so this actually happened to me. So there was, I think, someone on social media and she was posting like some things that were kind of like deep and like sad, like those like the poetry that you see when like it's like super deep poetry. And so a lot of people started like talking about that person, and they were like, oh my god, look at her posting all of this, she must be depressed, haha, and they're like laughing about it. And the thing is, at that time I wanted to reach out for help, and by hearing my friends say such things about another person, I actually got really scared. I was like, I mean, I don't want to tell them. Like, why should I tell them? They're just going to make fun of me. And like, it just makes the entire process of reaching out for help much more difficult because people don't understand the terms that they're using, and they don't understand that, maybe she's just trying to express herself. That's probably like her outlet, like the way that she did, like, relieves the emotions that she's going through. And I don't think it was okay for anybody to make fun of her for doing that. So I just wanted to share that.
And I think anyone who posts it on social media, like about them feeling upset, I think the main reason why they're doing it is for them to feel better about themselves and for someone to actually reach out to them. But I think many people in our generation just assume that the person's trying to get attention. Like any person that puts a sad quote or something that's affecting them, or just a small comment on their story, it's like it's made such a big deal about. They're like, oh my god, did you look at that? And no one has any chill. Like everyone's making it's just making the person feel so bad, and it's all behind their back, and like, oh my god, she's trying to get attention, or he's just trying to get attention. Like,
Yeah, I think one of the worst parts about the stigma is that I find people calling others attention seeking just because they're trying to reach out for help. And I find that thought just seems so ridiculous. Like, how can you belittle someone else who's just trying to reach out for help? And no one ever realizes that they're doing it until it goes to an extreme, like somebody committing suicide. And that's really sad because only until it goes to that extreme do people even realize what they're doing in the first place. And even after that, no one changes. So it's yeah.
and one
Yeah,
important thing. Sorry.
go ahead.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that I completely agree. Like I usually feel so angry because it's only after someone takes such a drastic step that people are like, oh, we should have done something. And then they have that, they think those things, and like immediately after a week it's back to normal. Nothing is done. So I just think that, and especially like the way people, like we live in a generation where on social media and everywhere, like one thing I learned to Let's Talk is like one misconception I personally had going into it was that we should go to every like person and say, you should reach out for help, it's good to seek help, it's good to seek help. And like I just kept like saying that to everyone, but then I realized after some time that I think if we create an environment where people don't immediately like put you down for seeking out help, then people will automatically start reaching out. But there's no point really like telling people that they should reach out if they're going to, face like backlash for it. So I think before we, start telling people that they need to reach out for help, we need to create those safe spaces, in people's homes, in schools, in friend groups, where people feel like they can reach out without facing any type of like comments that make things worse for them.
And I was saying that if you do find someone on social media or anywhere that is hinting towards them being upset or depressed or any of this, I think if you know you can't handle it, like tell the person that, listen, I'm there for you, but I'm not sure of what to say to you. Like, don't say anything that comes to your mind, because if you don't know how to deal with the person and the situation, it's not your responsibility to deal with it, and that you should know that it's not your responsibility. It's just to like tell them that, listen, I'm there for you, but I suggest you talk to this person. It could be your friend, it doesn't have to be a psychiatrist. But it's that if you can't deal with the situation, I recommend don't talk to the person or don't bullshit your way through it, because it's not something to joke about or not something that you can take lightly. It's going to worsen the other person's situation, and you don't know what you're doing. So it's better if you don't do it. So like that's one more thing that people should understand, I guess.
I wanted to add to what Tavisha is saying here. So often, when you're going through something and you don't really know someone that well and they're reaching out to you about it, they tend to give very generic advice. They're doing their best, I understand, but sometimes they say very generic things like, this too shall pass, which can be very reassuring. But sometimes they say it with that tone that you know that it'll pass, so you should just move on right now, that it's not important enough for you to waste your time on right now, which can be very invalidating, and it can be very hurtful when you're actually going through something. And a lot of adults and teachers who have this stigma around mental health will say things like, it'll pass, and you're so young, why are you bothering with these types of things, you should just move on from it. So it can be very problematic if you don't know the right way to respond, that you do say something, then it can make the other person who's trying to reach out even more reluctant to reach out. So yeah.
And also, I just want to add on, a lot of people have often told me, like, other people are going through so much worse. Like, and they think that's like a comforting line, but really, honestly, at that moment, you don't want to hear such a thing. Like, we know other people are going through worse, but the fact that they like bring it up sort of feels like they're, belittling your emotions, or like saying it's not that important. Like, just move on, like, just leave it. So I think that's really important that you don't say that to someone. Also, there was two questions, I think. So one of them is, what kind of support is available in schools in India or elsewhere in the world to support mental health amongst young adults? Are students encouraged by school authorities to take this help? Are these attitudes improving amongst adults?
Do you guys want to talk about Project Let's Talk and what it's doing in this regard?
Sure, yeah. So Project Let's Talk is basically where we try to use the idea that having more knowledge about a topic makes you less inclined to be ashamed of having open conversations about it. So we conduct interactive awareness sessions, mostly with teenagers, because we're trying to make them understand, because nowadays there's so much pressure on teenagers. The idea of your academics being like the one major indicator of your success in life and things like that. So there's so much pressure on teenagers. So we're trying to reach out to them and tell them that mental health is a thing. It is equal to your physical health, and you should be taking care of it. And yeah, so that's what we do. I think Arnie can explain a little more.
Yeah, so Kashish and I actually started Let's Talk when we were just like 13 or 14 years old. And we did that because both of us had friends at that point who were, like really struggling. They were self harming. They exhibited symptoms of depression. But like every time we tried to talk to them, they would just say, they would like brush us off and say it's fine. Or, you know what, I don't want to go to the school counselor. I don't want to like tell my parents because like it won't help and they'll just judge me and it'll create like a mess. So Kashish and I were in the same bus and we talked about it a lot and we decided that, like something had to be done about this because it affected both of us personally so much. So we do this through conducting awareness sessions in both government and private schools. And government schools is like very important for us to conduct sessions in because over there's like absolutely no knowledge about mental health. Like I remember we asked them, "Do you know what mental health means?" And they were just like, "No, no, nobody really knew." So it's so important that they also have that knowledge. And so far, we've conducted around 106 awareness sessions, impacted around 3,400 students with the help of a team of 20 and over 100 volunteers. We've also presented our project at the United Nations. So both of us are very proud of what we've been able to do so far. And I think to answer a question in the chat box, um, what type of support is available in schools in India or everywhere in the world to support mental health. So there's this thing called the happiness curriculum, which has actually been implemented in some CBSE schools. I think very recently the government of India has taken this initiative, and we don't know so far what the results are, but there is like more conversation happening in schools. I feel definitely people are like talking about mental health more, but I don't think we're at the point that we need to be yet, especially in India, because in India it's like a very taboo topic. But in schools in the US, there's like a lot more education about mental health. And there's even a bill that's been passed in Oregon, which basically allows students to take like mental health days. So this is a real thing where you have like a certain amount of mental health days. And if you feel like you're too stressed, you can just call the school and tell them with your parent that I'm taking a mental health day, and they won't like punish you for it at all. It's completely acceptable. So there are very cool things being done, I feel, to tackle the stigma and help students.
And I think, especially with the COVID situation, mental health is being talked about a lot more. It's being written about in the news, and also people are starting to understand what mental health is more, because we're being faced with a lot of fears and anxiety with this, the new COVID um, vaccine coming up and all of that. There's a lot of fears and anxieties that come up, and I think that is making people think about their mental state more. Also, the having the shift from physical to online, everything online is again affecting everybody. So there again, mental health is coming a lot, like coming about more.
This is also kind of related to the next question asked. Do you see stigma attached with mental health improving or getting worse amongst the current generation? So in this, I feel like it goes both ways. So like we spoke about before, people making fun of people suffering, I feel like that definitely increases the stigma around it. Because of that, like Ria mentioned, it made it harder for her to reach out for help. So that definitely increases the stigma. But at the same time, a lot of people are getting there's a lot of awareness being raised, especially with COVID and stuff. So that also helps reduce the stigma. So it goes both ways. Does anybody
I
want to add on?
Yeah, I also think a lot more of the teenagers now, like ourselves, are actually more aware of what mental health is, what the illnesses are, and what to do about it. And we're also trying to like create more awareness about this stigma that is present. So I think that's another thing that helps bring down the stigma. But of course, in our generation, I think we've seen like the most number of mental illness cases that haven't been like, taken up further or haven't reached out for help type of situations. So it can go both ways.
Okay, so the next thing we wanted to discuss was what each of our projects aim to do to reduce the stigma. Project Let's Talk already kind of spoke about this. Is there anything you'd like to add on?
Sure. So on top of doing like government school and private school sessions, we've moved online. So like this webinar, we conduct webinars. We also have like different teams working on things like article writing and interviews and campaigning. So we interview people who have experienced, like mental health conditions, and if they feel comfortable, we share their stories to kind of raise awareness, because I think that once you see like people speaking out about what they've been through, it's very powerful, and you kind of get that courage as well. And we're also starting a chapter program where people can start Let's Talk chapters anywhere in India. So we're trying to expand, and that's what we'll be doing in the coming months. So yeah, some very exciting things.
And about Griseo. So, like I mentioned when answering the question, the stigma is reducing with the amount of awareness being raised. So, we are more focused on raising awareness about it. So, we started a website, griseo.in, and on our website, we just post a lot of articles, and we'll have more content coming soon. Just educating people about different topics related to mental health. So we mainly focus on the two major mental illnesses, which is depression and anxiety, but we also talk about more like OCD, bipolar disorder, etc. So what in my opinion, by raising more awareness about this and educating people about like what exactly depression actually is, what anxiety actually is, I feel like that also reduces the stigma, because people have a lot of misconceptions about each of these mental illnesses, which also contributes to why they look down upon people.
We also thought that by posting articles about this, it's like often when you search online, you find all these like resources, but it's really hard for you to get like all of them compilated like into one source. Like you'll have to go through a couple of websites to find out different information. So we tried to go through those and put them together for everyone else to read. And I think by reading about the illnesses, like suppose you're suffering with one of them, at least for me, what helped was actually understanding how like what the illness is and how it affects you, because then you're able to figure out what you can do to sort of like take control over it rather than let it control you. So that's another reason why we wanted to post these articles. We're also working on a chatbot type of feature where instead of like having to reach out to another person, you may be able to chat with some like a chatbot where it would be able to tell you a couple of coping tips that you have, like that you can use when you're having a panic attack, or just like daily check-ins with your mood, so that we can, like, so that you can track your mood and figure out what's happening with you.
So our entire project is mainly based online. I mean, that's mainly because we started it during times of COVID, but it's also easily accessible. So the next point of discussion was what the audience can do to cope with and reduce the stigma.
I think to cope with stigma, um, you shouldn't self doubt or shame yourself or even downplay on the entire notion of mental illness yourself. How much ever people stigmatize it around yourself, I think you should know that, listen, they are stigmatizing this topic and that they're wrong. And I know better. And like you shouldn't shame or self doubt or do any of that to yourself. And I think the audience should make sure that they're mindful of what they're saying. So, like, one of the other things that we just wanted to discuss about was just the use of words like bipolar. Like, don't throw these words around. I think everyone should know that these words are technical, these are clinical, and that the audience should be very mindful of the words they're using. Autistic, bipolar, psycho, like just be mindful of what you're saying. And I think that's one thing that the audience could do.
Another thing that the audience could do is educate yourself about each of the illnesses, or just about what mental health is in general, because then that would make you more open to other people talking about it, as well as just, in general, just understanding what's happening. And you could also correct other people when they throw around such words like Tavisha had mentioned. So that's really important to like prevent this stigma.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that a lot of people feel like to reduce the stigma, they have to take action, but they don't realize that even if they take action, if they are not sensitive, they could actually end up adding to the stigma. So I really agree that, like, firstly, like, just educate yourself, talk to people, read on. There's like so many resources available. There's courses available for you to take to kind of like educate yourself on how to go about helping people if you want to do that. And if you're just like a parent, or if you're a friend and you want to help your child, or someone I think just having, like, just creating a safe space, or just having a conversation. It doesn't have to be about what that person is going through necessarily, but just like how their day was and how they felt about their day. But just like creating a space where people can openly talk about feelings. I think it all just comes down to like feelings. And once people feel that they can share their feelings, they'll start opening up more and more. But even if you're just like a parent and you don't think anything's wrong, but I think it's always helpful to just create a space where your child can always just come and talk to you about how they're feeling that day.
So I think the next point of discussion was the stigma in India. So we wanted to talk about the loose usage of terminology, common misconceptions about mental illnesses.
So one of the points I had was slurs being used loosely without knowing the full implication. So like Tavisha gave a few examples, and there are also like mental and other words which are used without knowing the full impact. And like there are many aspects to using those words, and people use it thinking that it's not going to have that big of an effect. I'm using it in a casual situation, but nobody realizes that there's way more to using those words, and that can actually affect a person a lot, which again builds up to the stigma.
Yeah, I also wanted to talk about how Tavisha was saying that the use of words like bipolar or crazy in just regular conversations, they're commonly used to like describe dangerous activities that others are doing, which automatically like creates that connection that people who are mentally ill are dangerous.
It's 5 o'clock.
Which can, I'm sorry, which can make the people with these mental illnesses feel more isolated, and it can also make people who are trying to reach out more reluctant. So yeah.
Yeah, another one of those terms that I use quite lightly is OCD. I've often heard many people like write down something like, they're like, oh my God, I need to organize my planner. I'm so OCD. Like, I'm sorry, that is not the definition of what being OCD is. And firstly, like, are you trying to say you're obsessive compulsive disorder? Because that's what you're literally saying. Like, like that's literally what you're saying, that when you're saying, oh, I'm so OCD. The thing is, like with OCD, many people associate it with, being like afraid of, germs and things like that. But there's actually many different types of OCD that you can go through. OCD is often like you have very intrusive thoughts when like when you're going, like if you're diagnosed with OCD. And like most people think that just because you're organized and, like, you're like clean in general, that's like a personality trait. That's not you having a disorder, because when you have a disorder, it's usually about compulsions that are like like if you think about it, they're pretty stupid compulsions. Like people often have compulsions like, oh, if I don't close my door in 5 seconds, my entire family will get like, they'll be in danger or something bad will happen to them. Like there are often compulsions like that. It's not just about being clean or being neat.
Yeah, adding on to that, it's kind of like, especially now, I feel like a lot of people use words like depression and anxiety like really lightly. And if they just feel sad, then they say, I have depression. And like, especially with social media, I see that a lot too. Like, obviously, there is that aspect of people trying to reach out for help and people making fun of them. But on the other side, there's also people that falsely claim that they have depression and self-diagnosing themselves basically, which they might have, but it's still dangerous to just say it without actually being properly diagnosed.
Yeah, and to add to the second part of the question, which are like some misconceptions about mental illness, I think now with like the access to social media, a lot of us know that, mental illness is not something that you can control. But I definitely think like with adults and teachers, they just think that you can snap out of it because it's not something that's like physical. Like if I broke my leg, like nobody would tell me to like walk, right? They would be like, okay, she clearly has a broken leg, so she can't walk. But when you have something going on with you mentally, it's like people are just like, just get over it. Just and they start getting angry. They start blaming you for not getting better. So I think that's like a huge misconception among adults that it's in the child's control, and it's not. Like just how you can't control when you get fever or when you hurt yourself physically, you can't really control how you're feeling mentally or if you have a mental illness. So yeah, I think that's one of the big misconceptions around it.
And another point is like, honestly, mental illnesses are as serious as any like physical illness that you might have. And it is still very like, what I'm trying to say is, ultimately your brain is like the most important organ. Like it controls everything you do. If there's something wrong there, you need to get help and fix it. It's not something that you can just get over. It's not something you're making up. It's not just something in your head. There's actually hormones in your, like, hormone levels are fluctuating. That's the entire reason you have mental illnesses. It's almost like telling somebody who has like asthma, like, there's so much air around you. Why do you have asthma? Like it's so stupid. Like you would never say that to somebody. It's so stupid to say. But people will still come up to you and they're like, oh my God, you have so much in life. Like, why are you depressed? Like that's not the reason. That's really not the reason. It's not something we can control.
Yeah, again, and also just completely going to a different point, since this is about the stigma in India. So, like we mentioned, I think Kashish mentioned before, because of the loose usage of the words bipolar and stuff, it's automatically kind of related. There's the association made that people with bipolar, for example, are dangerous, and like that, just there's this association that people with a few mental illnesses are crazy, and these mental illnesses include like schizophrenia, dementia, and stuff. And the word crazy is used, which by itself creates so much stigma around those mental illnesses, and those mental illnesses just aren't talked about as much. And I mean, it makes sense because like they aren't as common as depression and anxiety. But still, I guess that also that because depression and anxiety are also termed as mental illnesses, and dementia and schizophrenia are also termed as mental illnesses, because they all come under the same bracket. People create that association that and and people are alienated because of that. They're like, okay, just don't associate yourself with someone with depression or anxiety or any mental illnesses, in fact.
And I have this own personal anecdote of like one of my friends in my old school. She was going through something and she was aware. She's like, okay, fine, maybe I need to get help, because you can't always point out where you're going wrong and what's affecting you. So she wanted to go. So she told her parents about it, and I think, I don't know if it's just my school or it was all of yours, or do you guys know of any schools? But the school council is not to be trusted so much, because you have this thing that, the school council won't understand, he or she is going to tell other teachers, or it's going to make like she will tell my mom, or they will tell someone, or like there's just so much associated with it. The school counselor is just not like, no one ever goes to that person. And that was there for like a couple of schools that I've been to previously. And so she asked her parents, and her parents told her to go to the school counselor, and that led to one thing, and she never went, and it just got worse, worse, worse. And like I saw it happen. So I think like educating and like telling your parents about what it is, and like really trying. I mean, it's India, and many parents do have this associate. It's the entire notion of mental illness is so downplayed on, right? So just trying to get people to understand, including your teachers and your parents, and actually like if they don't understand, like there are other ways you can talk to your friends who might help you, or their parents. But I just feel like we should really create that environment, like all of you have mentioned, because if you can't approach a school counselor that is for the reason of helping you through this process, then what is a society even doing? Like it's such a big thing, because the counselor is there to just help you, guide you through this process, and that's the individual that is put in place for it, but you never approach them. So it's just, yeah, like,
Yeah, on similar lines, like a lot of like I've been approached by different teachers, and like some of them have actually sort of forced me to pinpoint one exact event that took place, which is why I had depression or anxiety. And I just wanted to clarify that it's not like one event that defines everything. Like it's like a culmination of things. And sometimes a lot of the times you don't even know how exactly you ended up in this situation. It happens so quickly and like you don't realize it a lot of the times. And a lot of people have always asked me like, um, oh, why don't you just like what was that one time you like, the depression started or something? Like it's like a culmination of events. You can't like pinpoint one area or pinpoint one reason. And I think a lot of the issues like stem from like people not understanding what exactly the illness is in the first place. Like if you force somebody to give you a reason of why they're depressed, that's not going to like that's not doing anything other than just like putting them in a really odd position. You're putting them on the spot. And like I was put in that position once and I was telling the person like I'm not sure why exactly, like I cannot figure it out, like I don't know what's going on. And like that person was just like giving me like lists of reasons, like, oh, is it this, is it this, is it this? Like I'm sorry, can you please let me breathe and just like let me understand what is happening? Like we don't need people attacking the person about what they're going through. You just have to be calm and actually like listen or just like sit there with them. Like even just sitting in the same room as somebody, if is fine. Like if you don't know what to do, just like stay back and just listen or just stay there.
Yeah, and to add to that, I honestly feel so angry when I see people think that you have to justify why you're going through something. And if you're not comfortable with saying why, it's like automatically your experience is invalid or you're lying. Like I mentioned, how like that person like forced me to talk about why I was going through what I was. I didn't want to. I just felt like I wasn't comfortable with her. And then immediately after I did that, she told me that, well, that's not a good enough reason because I can tell you like this happened to that person and that happened to this person and they're fine. And it's like nobody has to tell you why they're, I mean, it's honestly like if they do, then that's good that they're sharing, but it means it's because they're comfortable with you. It doesn't mean that you have a right to demand anything of anyone. And I think some people feel that by asking, like by forcing someone to share, it will make the situation better. But I don't think that's the answer at all, and that's something like everyone should be mindful of.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Arnie said. was saying, I think one time I was talking to someone about what I was going through, and they were like, "Oh, I've been through the same thing, and this is exactly what I did to get through it. So if you do this, you can get through it too." And it's the fact is that maybe that would be helpful, but the fact that you're saying that it will definitely better when I do all of these things makes it feel like when it doesn't get better when I do it, I feel like even worse. That did I fail at even like trying to improve what I was trying to. I mean, it can be very frustrating when someone is just like when they think that they can tell you exactly what to do and you will get better, and then they make you feel like it's not right, like what you are doing isn't right when it doesn't work for you as well. So it's just
And yeah, like adding on to that, like it can be helpful for you to reach out to someone who has been in a similar situation, but there's always a line of how that person should like talk to you about what they've been through as well. Like if someone is sharing something to you and you just keep interrupting them saying, "Oh yeah, I felt the same thing. I did this and it was fine." Like that's not how you're supposed to approach it. Like you have to guide them and you have to mainly listen to them rather than interrupting them with your like what you've been through. Like you will have your time to share that with them later, but you have to be mindful of what they're going through as well, because often when you're talking to someone about what you're feeling and they compare what they went through or what they're feeling as well, and they keep bringing themselves in, you sort of feel like whatever you're saying is not as important. So it's really like important to be mindful of how you're approaching the situation.
And to like add to the conversation about giving like helping people, I think it's also important to keep in mind that you need to help yourself first. Like even if that person is someone you care about, even if you want to help, like if it's going to impact you, then you have to like make a decision that, like I need to protect my own mental health, because sometimes you can try so hard to save other people and then you yourself start getting affected. Like in eighth grade, I remember I was helping like so many people with their experiences just because I felt like I knew what to do. I had gone through so much, I was better now. And I think I helped like literally, like I'm not exaggerating, every day I would be online trying to help people. And I never thought it was affecting me. Like all my friends would be like, who knew about it, they'd be like, I think this is wrong what you're doing to yourself. And I'm like, no, no, it's fine. Like I don't feel anything. And then in ninth, and after I stopped, a few months later, I felt the impact. And like for an entire year in ninth grade, I kind of just shut down emotionally. Like I wasn't able to open up to people. I wasn't able to help people. It was like the most horrible thing. And all because I gave too much of myself and I was so like willing to help others. So I think there's a very fine line between what you can do as a someone who's like a child and you're, untrained, you're not a professional, you haven't been to like years and years of therapy, like schooling and all that. So yeah, definitely like keep in mind your own boundaries and what you're comfortable with.
And just adding on, there's nothing wrong in telling your friend that, I'm going through something right now. I want to help you, but, I don't think I'll be able to take it on. Like, I don't think I would be the right person. It's all right to say something like that. Like, you shouldn't feel bad that you're saying such a thing to your friend. You should be like comfortable enough to tell them and, just share what your boundary is.
Yeah, it's just basically it's all right to say no. Also, this is all the time we have for the discussion. Thank you so much, Tavisha, Arini, and Kashish for joining us. We hope to work with you again in the future, maybe. And yeah, the next session is going to be with Dr. Purnima about the importance of treatment, and it's going to start in a minute. So.
Thank you so much, guys.